tomato plant collapses in July. The soil beneath it is hard as brick. The leaves curl, yellow, then crisp at the edges. At the store, the price of lettuce has doubled again. Eggs disappear for a week, and a storm takes out a highway, and suddenly the shelves look like somebody exhaled and emptied them. Most people see these as separate problems. Weather, inflation, bad luck, a difficult season. But if you have ever stood in your yard, holding a packet of seeds, staring at dead starts and a rising grocery bill, you're not looking at personal failure. You're looking at a food system that only works when every truck arrives on time. Every chemical input stays cheap, and every season behaves. And every household keeps paying more for less. And every household keeps paying more for less. That is the trap. We've been taught to think food comes from effort and money alone. Work harder, buy better fertilizer, upgrade the irrigation, replace the soil, add another input, and if it still fails, blame yourself. You can feel that illusion breaking in small, humiliating ways. Herbs at the market, sold in plastic, for the price your grandparents would have paid for a full meal. Tomatoes bred to survive shipping, but not to taste like anything. Backyard gardeners hauling bags of potting mix, bottles of nutrients, hoses, pellets, sprays, cages, clips, and still ending the season with 3 cucumbers and a fungus problem. And this is not an accident. We inherited a model of agriculture that separates everything that used to cooperate. Water over here, fertility over there, animals in one zone, plants in another. Waste removed as a problem instead of cycled as a resource. So every part of the system becomes hungry on its own. That is why so many people feel a strange combination of guilt and exhaustion around food. They're doing what they were told, spending more, planning more, storing more, learning more. Long before this became normal, people built food systems that did not panic when supply lines snapped because the fertility did not come from a factory and the protein did not arrive in a bag. Their resilience was biological, local, circular. It was built into the design itself. So if your garden keeps failing, if groceries feel less reliable every month, if the whole thing seems weirdly expensive and weirdly brittle at the same time, and once you see that the problem is systemic, not personal, a different question opens. Not how do I push harder inside this broken model, but what laws did we abandon that made food production stable in the first place? That is the scam hiding in plain sight. You were told the answer to weak plants was more input, more blue pellets, more liquid feed, more tilling, more sprays, more bags with smiling vegetables printed on the front. Modern agriculture sells rescue while manufacturing dependency. That is why the bill never stops. The crop that can only survive on purchased nitrogen is not a healthy crop. It is a crop on life support. The soil that needs constant disturbance is not alive in any meaningful sense. The tragedy is that plants were never meant to feed alone. In a functioning ecosystem, roots don't sit in dirt like straws in a cup. They trade, sugars move out, minerals and signals move back. Fungi stretch through the ground like an underground transport web, carrying water, phosphorus, trace elements, even warning messages from one plant to another. Bacteria buffer swings, cycle waste, unlock nutrients, and help roots resist disease. You can see this damage without a microscope. It shows up as a white crust on the soil's surface. It shows up as water beating and running off instead of sinking in. It shows up as tomato roots circling in a bag of premium vegetable mix. That looked rich in the store, but dries out like ash in the sun. It shows up as a backyard gardener standing in a big box aisle, comparing 3 kinds of calcium spray because the peppers have blossom end rot again. It shows up in fish systems too. And once you notice that pattern, a lot of your frustration stops feeling personal. Maybe you did everything the package said. Maybe you watered on schedule, fertilized on schedule, sprayed on schedule, and still ended up with curled leaves, pest outbreaks, and a grocery receipt that felt like punishment. That doesn't automatically mean you failed. It may mean you followed instructions written for a system that only works. When you keep buying the next bottle, the next amendment, the next correction, a conveyor belt disguised as nature. The real insult is that this dead-end model gets marketed as modern, while older, more biologically intelligent systems are treated like fringe experiments. We're told that sterility is control, that bare soil is neat, that weeds are enemies, that fertility comes from factories. But any system that destroys the organisms responsible for nutrient cycling and then charges you to replace their work is not advanced. So if you've been blaming your climate, your luck, your skill, pause there. The deeper issue may be that you were handed a broken script, one where every symptom creates a new market, and every new market makes the original biology harder to recover. Once you see that, the question changes. The part most people miss is that this system doesn't work. just because a pump moves water. It works because life starts colonizing surfaces you can't even see. The gravel isn't just something to hold up a tomato plant. The inside of every wet stone becomes real estate. A thin, invisible film builds there first, then bacteria move in. Then more bacteria, different jobs, different layers. That is why beginners crash these systems when they rush. The fish aren't the first residents, the bacteria are. If you add fish before that microbial workforce is established, you're basically moving a family into a house before the walls exist. The water looks clean, so people assume it is safe. Then the fish hover at the surface, they gasp, the plants stall. Everyone blames the species, the pump, the weather, bad luck. But the real failure happened earlier, in a stage so boring most tutorials try to speed past it. Picture what is actually happening inside a flood and drain bed. Water rises through the media, carrying dissolved nutrients upward. Then it drains back down, and air follows into the empty spaces. That rhythm matters. Roots don't just want water, they want oxygen too. So every cycle is doing two jobs at once, delivering fertility and pulling fresh air into the root zone. It is less like drowning a plant, and more like a lung, inhaling and exhaling on a timer. 15 minutes of flood, 45 minutes of air. And once you see that, the whole thing stops looking like a gadget and starts looking like ecology in a box. Fish are not fuel, and plants are not just output. The grow bed is a biological filter. The bacteria are the cleanup crew. The roots are nutrient harvesters. Gravity closes the loop. Even the simplest setup is not a pile of parts. That is also why these systems can be absurdly productive in a small footprint. A single 4x8 bed over a 300-gallon tank is not magic. It is concentration, 30 or 40 plants drawing from continuously enriched water, continuously being cleaned, continuously being recirculated. Lettuce reaches harvest in weeks because it is not fighting compacted soil, or nutrient lockout, or dry spells between your busy days. It is sitting in a zone where food and oxygen arrive on schedule, arriving every hour, every single day. University trials have measured that speed. Lettuce that takes a month in aquaponics can take half again as long in soil. But the impressive part is not just faster growth, it is the mechanism. Faster growth happens when the root zone stays stable. Even the fish choice follows this same logic. Tilapia are popular, not because someone crowned them the perfect prepper fish, but because they tolerate fluctuation while the system matures. Catfish make sense where winters bite harder. Bluegill fit people who want a tougher, lower drama setup. What species matches your climate, your management level, your water temperatures, your patience? This is not about copying one ideal model from the internet, and that may be the most important law we forgot. Healthy systems are built from relationships, not ingredients. Industry sells nutrients as if fertility comes in bags. Nature builds fertility by routing one organism's excess into another's need. Waste from the tank becomes food in the bed. Oxygen returns where roots need it. Water leaves and comes back cleaner. The strange part is this: the breakthrough is usually not adding more. It is taking one layer of effort away and letting biology do the job you were trying to do by force. Most people assume food security must come from pumps, bottles, and schedules, perfect measurements, and constant intervention. But the cheapest leap is often almost embarrassing in its simplicity. Lay down plain cardboard over weedy ground and soak it. Cover it with leaves, old straw, grass clippings, and kitchen scraps. Then walk away. No tiller, and no double digging. No hauling out roots, one by one, in the sun like punishment. Just a lightless cover, a carbon blanket, and time. Under that sheet, weeds lose their advantage, and moisture stops fleeing. Worms rise into the dark, and fungi stitch the layers together. What looked like a dead patch starts processing itself from below, doing it quietly, and without applause. This is the part modern gardening almost trains you not to believe. You do less, and more starts happening. You stop ripping open the soil every season, and suddenly, the soil stops acting injured every season. You stop exposing every inch to heat and wind, and the ground begins holding water like it was designed to. You stop treating fallen leaves like trash, and they become insulation, food, sponge, shelter, and future humus all at once. A pile of yard waste is only waste inside a system that forgot what decomposition is for. In a living system, the mess is the engine. The brown leaves, the trimmed stems, the coffee grounds, and the peelings. The torn Amazon box in your garage. Those are not leftovers. That is next season's fertility before it changes shape. And because this sounds too easy, people skip it and reach for expensive solutions. Bags of fertilizer, bottled minerals, and raised beds filled with imported soil. another gadget, and another test kit, another gadget, and another test kit, another weekend of labor, because the first weekend of labor failed. Meanwhile, the low-cost move that shifts everything is often one afternoon. One afternoon, with free materials, cardboard from a liquor store, a rake, and a wheelbarrow of leaves, maybe some half-rotten wood, if you have it. Bury a log, or stack branches under a mound, and cover them. That old wood becomes a slow reservoir, holding moisture deep in the bed, while fungi colonize it. Like wiring, in a hidden circuit. In a dry spell, that buried carbon keeps feeding the root zone from underneath. In a wet spell, the sponge effect buffers the extremes. It looks primitive, but it acts sophisticated. You can see it in the body, before you see it in the data. The gardener, who used to drag a hose every evening, suddenly notices the soil is still cool at noon. The person who kept watching seedlings crisp and stall notices fewer losses after a hot wind. The bed that used to crust over now smells sweet when lifted. It is dark, fungal, and alive. Even the failures change character. Instead of total wipeout, you get partial damage and recovery. The system starts absorbing shocks, and that is the real leverage point. Not maximum output in perfect conditions, but resilience when conditions turn ugly. Because weather does turn ugly, water gets expensive, attention gets scarce. Life interrupts the fantasy of daily maintenance. A garden that only works when you are hovering over it is not freedom. It is just another dependent machine. So if you want one move that feels almost too lazy to matter, start there. Cover the soil, feed the surface. Let decomposition happen, where the life already knows how to use it. Not in a landfill, not after a truck ride. Right, where your next crop will grow. If you have a balcony, use a bucket and layer scraps with dry leaves. If you have a side yard, sheet mulch one ugly strip and watch what returns to it. If you have room for a mound, bury woody debris and build upward instead of digging downward. The point is not to copy a perfect design. The point is to stop interrupting the work of organisms that have been building fertility for millions of years for free. That is the reversal most people need. You are not starting from nothing. You're standing on a workforce you have been trained not to notice. Bacteria, fungi, insects, worms, shade, mulch, moisture, time. Get those allies working, and the system begins carrying part of your load. Carrying it without asking for wages. Miss them, and you will keep paying in cash, effort, and disappointment. What is the simplest thing you've ever done in a garden that worked better than the complicated version? Zoom out 10 years. A storm hits 3 states. Trucks stall. One disease scare, one fuel spike, one ugly week of panic. The grocery store turns into a theater of bad instincts. Carts rattling, shelves stripped clean, lettuce gone first because it always does. Herbs reduced to plastic clamshells, sweating under fluorescent light. Prices rewritten by hand, on little paper tags. People standing there, doing the math in public, pretending not to. Do I buy greens? Do I get enough for 3 days? Or enough for 3 kids? That is what dependence looks like when the system stops smiling. Now cut to a smaller scene. Your shoes on damp soil, a bucket of feed in your hand, a lid lifting, fish breaking the surface in quicksilver flashes, water moving through pipe, and bed and root and back again. You pull a head of lettuce that is still cold from the morning air. You cut basil. That smells like actual basil, not shipping. Maybe jars in the cellar, maybe trays by a south-facing wall. Maybe it is not a big backyard, just one stubborn square of space that you stop treating like decoration. But when everyone else is racing towards scarcity, you're walking toward life. That difference matters more than the harvest weight, because this was never just about saving a few dollars on greens or building a gadget. It is about refusing the most dangerous lie in modern life, that your survival must always pass through someone else's warehouse, someone else's truck route, someone else's pricing algorithm, someone else's permission. The moment food only exists for you as a barcode, you're vulnerable in ways most people don't feel until the shelves go bare. A living system changes that, not perfectly, not magically, but concretely. You know where dinner came from, because you touched the water. You know what fed the plants, because the fish did. You know what didn't touch your food, because you were there. No mystery spray, no 1,000-mile shrug, no corporate label asking trust. While hiding the process, just a loop, repeating quietly, converting care into nourishment. And there is another thing that happens when you build this. You stop feeling helpless, that low-grade panic modern people carry. The sense that everything essential is fragile, expensive, and outside your control starts to loosen. In its place comes competence. You notice temperature, shade, timing, water clarity. You learn to read a leaf before problems. You stop being a consumer of crises and become a steward. That is a different posture in the world. Straighter spine, slower heartbeat. Better decisions. Industrial food can imitate abundance. It cannot imitate relationship. It can flood shelves when the machine works, but cannot give confidence of stepping outside and seeing protein and produce cycling through your system. It cannot sell you the feeling of opening a back door. Instead of a panic app, it cannot manufacture dignity. So when people say this is just gardening, they miss the scale of what is being reclaimed. Gardening is the surface, underneath it is jurisdiction, agency, the right to meet a human need without kneeling to dependency. In a stable era, that sounds like a lifestyle choice. But not now. In an unstable era, it becomes food sovereignty at household scale. Maybe you don't have a big yard? Fine then, start smaller. Then your excuses, a tank, a bed, a barrel, a corner, that gets light. The point is not to recreate an ancient empire. In your suburb, the point is to recover one functioning loop. One piece of proof that you're not trapped inside the only system you were offered. One place where biology still works for you, because you finally stopped fighting it. That is, the contract. You give attention, the system gives resilience, you give structure, and when the next shock comes, and it will come, the contrast will be sharp. Other people will be buying whatever is left, at whatever price, from wherever it managed to survive. You'll be pulling real food from water, soil, root, and leaf, and storage you prepared before the panic began, because you're responsible.